Hi, I'm Austin Wintory, and I want to do another deep dive into some music from Stray Gods. This time I'm going to be talking about the big finale of the game that we call The Trial. So one of the things that makes this song unique is that it's less about the choices that you make during the song and more about the choices that you made through the entire game. One of my big pitches to Summerfall and to my co-writers from Tripod was that it's not just that these songs are branching and widely narratively variable in the moment, but that they start to accrue branches as a result of things that you did before. So it's a well-known sort of classic move to make when composing for musical theater, to make, your act one closer or the big finale showstopper ending reference earlier songs and motifs and like that and bring them together and kind of smear them all together. We very much wanted to do that here, but with the added wrinkle that we don't know what songs you've chosen or which characters you've bonded with, that kind of thing. So we had to make this massive sort of suitcase full of possibilities, even though a lot of them it will automatically play into. So I want to step through those. So let's start from the top. I'm going to get into the details of the song now, so needless to say, spoilers ahead. So the trial begins where Grace has not proven her innocence. She's to be put to death. It's all seemingly a settled deal. And Grace, realizing that Athena is in fact the one behind the murders, says, "It wasn't me, it was you." And there's a bit of a showdown. And then the idea that we had was, what if the song starts with a kind of cold open feeling, a cappella, just Athena owning up to it and saying she would. The idea was that this wouldn't really be Athena's theme in the sense of a melody we associate overtly with her, but it's actually a melody associated with the Furies, which are kind of her weapon, her instrument for death and these executions. So once we had that musically worked out, I could go back and pepper it into the game in scenes that are associated with either Athena or the Furies. So it became a very simple little fanfare-ish kind of figure that gave us a lot of flexibility also for setting to lyrics.
The one who gets it done. Don't you see? It had to be.
So this little motif here, this descending fifths motif, is what I actually really consider to be Athena's theme, but it's one that's never set to lyrics anywhere in the game. The idea was it something that I could kind of sneak into scenes subtly or explicitly. So I wrote it while we were figuring out this scene, but then of course it becomes the sound that you hear at the beginning of the choruses in a chord. This is that classic Citizen Kane Rosebud style trick where the game begins as a kind of murder mystery, and in the score I'm basically overtly telling you who the villain is from the start. One of the other things that came up in my Pan video about all the breakdowns of that song is how each character in the game has an instrument that I associate with them. Now, in some cases, there's also a full-blown melody, like in the case of Pan and Athena and Grace, but most of the time, it's just a color that I can add to the mix whenever we're referencing that character. So we have heard this one throughout the game whenever we're with Athena, but it really becomes a central part of this song, and that's the actual traditional Greek instrument called the bouzouki, in this case played by Tom Straley. If you've played the game, it's probably pretty obvious, but Athena representing this kind of, I want to try to hold tradition together kind of mindset, it made sense to make the one and only reference to actual Greek folk music come to her. It's a very simple part, but we'll be hearing a lot of it throughout the game. From there, the song does this normal branching between kick-ass, clever, and charming. In other words, red, blue, and green. And Grace turns this motif back on Athena. As usual, the instrumental associations applies. If you didn't see my prior video about the Pan song, where I really broke down how all these instrumental associations work, go check that out. But in summary, if we listen, you can hear, if I get rid of Grace and Athena's vocals, we've got our very prominent Tom Straley bass. And then clever with our swanky clarinet solos. Shout out to Andy Leonard for the great clarinet playing, and Orchestra Victoria for being a wonderful orchestra that recorded those string parts. And then, of course, if you choose Charming, you get the Niall Wilson harp solos. From here, the song will branch based on not what you're doing in the moment, but based on what you've done through the entire game. So what needs to happen is your so-called primary defender, that's what we called it internally while we were working on this, has to step up and stand by Grace's side. So the question was, well, how do we determine that? Well, the obvious thing, did you romance anybody? If so, that's your primary defender. Now that brings its own assumptions. For example, if Freddie is your romance, then Freddie has to be the muse, but that's a whole other discussion. If you did not choose a romance, the system goes, okay, what did you do during Old Wounds? Did you choose Persephone or Apollo? And then it goes, if you chose Persephone, what about what happened in the Underworld song? Did you choose Orpheus, or is Persephone on the throne? So let's say you chose Freddie, then we're going to reference the Freddie romance song that you just heard a little bit earlier in the game.
Only if only you knew that you can't force the future. Only if only you knew it's not just another thing you can subdue.
Only if only I lived in a quaint little pond like you. Only if I could just lie there and any time I moved, I'd tremble a reed or two.
And I know I've mentioned it repeatedly throughout, but the instrument associated with Freddie is the guitarlele, played by Tom Straley, which of course we hear in Force here. As just a fun little thing, when Athena usurps Freddie's melody, we get the bouzouki kind of coming in and asserting itself, even though the guitarlele keeps going, because again, this is Freddie's tune. What if you had romanced Pan? Well, then we bring back a kind of riff on Pan's romance song, which is actually itself a riff on the I Can Teach You Pan teaching song.
Leave her alone, she's not where the disease is. You want a tumor, cut out nieces. Won't get a fight here, no shining night here. I'm only here for the dance. And
if I mute Corey Payton's wonderful Pan vocals, once again, you can hear the kind of, that sort of swanky bass and drums, quasi New Orleans jazz sound that I have associated with Pan throughout the game. And of course, also the Rhodes piano type sound, very sort of distorted. It's also worth noting that the string arrangement here with these chopping bits and the little da-dee-da-da-dee-da-da is basically direct reference to Pan's romance song. Strings, once again, courtesy of Orchestra Victoria. I had the great pleasure of conducting those sessions, and that one little insert violin was played by Paul Cartwright, and the upright bass played by Eric Snoza. Now, let's say that you either romanced Persephone or have no romance, but chose Persephone after Old Wounds, and in the underworld assigned her to the throne instead of destroying it or giving it to Orpheus. That is what will lead to this section.
Lost little girls seems like a theme here. I grabbed the brass ring, but then what to do?
lot we can talk about here. Instrumentally and arrangement-wise, of course, the obvious is that I'm sort of recreating bits of the To Challenge a Queen orchestration with these high-string na-na-na-na-na-na motifs that we hear in that song. Same thing with Ian Roller playing this baritone sax kind of riff that's basically a direct quote from that song. And the prominence of the B3 organ, which is a sound that is explicitly associated with Persephone. Of course, obviously, this whole section is built around the motif of lost little girl from the Persephone challenging a queen scene, and something that shows up in a handful of places throughout the game, and it's not built off of her actual romance tune. Now, what if Persephone is your primary defender because you have no romance and you chose her, but you didn't put her on the throne? That is its own situation that seemed worthy of having a separate musical identity.
Lost little girls, they dream up a future. They're sure how they feel, sure their vision's true. I fought for that throne and then didn't take it, and that was okay. Could it be for you too? Of course you would make it all about you.
Great bit of lyric writing there from Jan, the idea that Athena is being told by Persephone, I lost my throne and you can survive it. It's a different perspective on she's still your primary defender, but it cost her a lot. And we wanted to reflect that. We wanted to make your choices actually really matter. Given that this is kind of a compromised version of Persephone, the orchestration is understandably a little bit more understated than the other version that you might hear. Just a little taste. And of course, what if you romanced our sad boy Apollo? Then you end up with this.
This I know, once the muse is dead, questions creep, they'll burrow in my head. What did I do? What didn't I do? All this time.
The instrument that I associate with Apollo is the vibraphone, played by the great Sidney Hobson, and I'm recreating motifs that you hear in his introductory song. So note that none of our color-coded choices of the electric bass or the harp or the clarinet are factoring into any of this. This needs to be branching based on a totally different set of criteria. From there, the song splits 12 ways because we needed 3 color-coded choices associated with each of the primary defenders. I'm not going to step through them all, but to just give you a random taste test, let's say Freddie is your primary defender, and then you respond to Athena by choosing Clever. Well, we're going to continue all that forward, and of course, throw in our clarinet.
Yes, there's a lot at stake, but remember, when the idols came to this new world, it was the right call for you to make, the right chance to take. None of you see.
In contrast, if we chose Charming in that moment, we get the continuation of that material, but featuring the harp, and obviously a slightly different message.
Yes, there's a lot at stake, but there are other paths you can take. None of you see.
Choosing another one at random here. Let's say Persephone is your advocate, and you choose Kick-Ass.
Still, Athena, I'm glad you were here to see how someone grew. None of you see.
Versus Persephone, Clever.
Wait, you're saying she is a narcissist, so now there's 2. None of you see.
And last one for good measure. Let's say Apollo charming.
You call that wise? Nobody needs to make a sacrifice. None of you see.
So from there, of course, the thing funnels to a dramatic showdown, and Athena wrests back control and tries to sing her motif once again. And there's that motif.
So it's down to me. It's fine. I'll take all the blame.
And I'll just say, once again, the bouzouki becomes a nice color instead of strumming guitar chords or something. Shout out something else kind of fun that you're hearing all throughout this sequence as a way to incorporate a shout out to my co-producer on all the songs in this game, Joris Hoekstetter. Joris is just an invaluable, wonderful contributor and an absolutely fantastic music producer and composer and songwriter and drummer, and he does it all. If you listen to Felicia Day's vocals of Athena on their own, she's got this wonderful kind of commanding presence, right?
So it's down to me. It's fine. I'll take all the blame. I'll take all the pain.
So there's an example of what I was doing to produce her vocals on their own. But then I went to Joris and I said, I'd love to add a kind of mystical quality. And so he took my comp and sort of played with it, played for me a few options, sent it back, and then we ended up with this additional layer here. So you see there's a lot of kind of reverses and stutter edits and backward reverbs, and so when you combine them, it gives her, I ride the volume of it up and down so that it's never super obvious, but yet it does feel like she's not just singing, she's powerful, and she's probably more powerful than Grace.
So it's down to me. It's fine. I'll take all the blame.
So with all that kind of planted in our ear, here's the full mix again.
So it's down to me. It's fine. I'll take all the blame. I'll take all the pain. Think you.
We then are confronted with another red, green, blue choice that the player has to make, but we wanted to make sure that when it does, it's referencing a hook or a motif or something that the player had heard before. So we had to kind of go and catalog what's something that they would have heard that then also feels thematically tied. The result of this is that even though it's just the 3 choices, there's actually 9 because we needed to come up with a bunch of different possibilities of things that you might have heard. So Athena says, yes, you two form a queue, time to follow through. And she's essentially saying, I'll execute anybody that gets in my way. Let's say you have a fists up, kick-ass kind of red response and say, bring it on, do your worst. The system goes back and says, well, the Persephone song is the most broadly associated with that. So let's bring that back, except we need each of the 3 motifs that you might have heard in that song to be what comes to bear. One thing all of these that I'm about to share have in common is they also start with me doing a big dramatic orchestral quote of that little Furies motif, but each had to be constructed in a way that's sort of unique to the scene. So that was fun because it was just a whole lot of theme and variations that I had to deal with. So if you choose kick-ass in this moment and in the earlier song you chose kick-ass, we end up with this.
This lost little girl, she's got a few tricks now. She's taken some punches, she's made some friends.
Made some friends.
Here's
Furies.
3 more little friends. Meet
the Furies.
Yeah, we've met. Nice to see you.
Oh, that's a brave face. We all know how this ends.
Such cute pets. I'll take the
We
set.
all know how this ends.
We all know how this ends, not to mention the lost little girl. Well, what if in the earlier Persephone song, Challenging a Queen, you had been primarily dealing with the clever hook?
Athena's never one to shirk any dirty work. Not counting these guys. Wait, they're the ones I saw. This time I'll get you.
You're just another one. Thinks she's a cut above. Puffed up and whistling as she skips into a war. Girl, I've met you 1,000 times before. 1,000 times before.
1,000 times before. And finally, of course, what if we had chosen Charming during Challenging a Queen?
Way back I was a gullible hack, some little child to scam. Cut to now, girl, I figured you out, but do you know who I am? I don't think you know who I am.
So just going down the list here for the sake of some memory lane. If you choose Clever in this moment instead of Kick-Ass, it then goes to the Apollo song and says, which flavor did you get? So if we choose Clever here, and in the Apollo song earlier, we principally had the Kick-Ass choice. Here's what we end up with.
Tell me that your mind can hear a single voice
Clarinet,
so doubt.
because we chose Clever now.
All I hear is multitudes in one united shout. Let this go, Athena, and the next thing you'll see the idols wiped out.
The next thing. So if we chose Clever now, and then we also chose Clever and had the Clever hook in the Apollo song.
Cause and effect. You feed this thing more blood, you'll feel regret. I know you know I'm right. You feel it deep inside.
If I stop now, Olympus is wrecked. Cause and effect.
And finally, what if during the Apollo scene we chose Charming and now we're choosing Clever?
Inside, somewhere inside, in that mind, there's a war. You're not sure.
Don't be so sure. We're not the same, never the same.
And finally, if during this scene you chose Charming, then we get the 3 hooks associated with the Aphrodite song. So the first of which is if you choose Charming, but in that earlier song you had chosen Kick-Ass, we end up with...
Hey, y'all, now listen, I'll be crystal clear. I'm saying this to everybody here. No substitutions, no, you're all too dear. We're keeping everybody leaves this place alive.
Gatesy's fabulous everybody motif. What if during the Aphrodite song you had chosen Clever, but are now choosing Charming?
case you're considering some gallant thing, listen to me. I need you to cool it, no taking a bullet. I won't let you be that kind of a god, the one who leaps off into the void to help the crops to grow. Oh no, death is not the only way to go.
It's actually quite a challenge to fold in that very explicitly kind of loungy, jazzy motif into the structure of this song without feeling like a just jukebox hard left turn like we've hit random on a Spotify playlist. Quoting the Furies motif at the beginning and all these different kind of aesthetic variations actually really helped get them in line and put the whole thing on rails, because one of the ways that I decided to make this song actually work and that Jan and I sort of committed to was that it never changes tempo ever. Most of the other ones do change tempo a bit, but this one, by keeping it all consistently at this quarter equals 160 BPM, I had to figure out ways to evoke those previous motifs and melodies and hooks and things like that without going to the original tempo that they were in, and finding ways to make that work where you could clock what it was. And it wasn't easy, but I found that these Aphrodite ones were probably some of the hardest to do in that way because there's so much tempo variation in that song. Lastly, if you're choosing Charming in this moment and earlier chose Charming in Aphrodite.
I won't have you dying for me. It's not how this should work. I need you to see you're lost in a moment, lost in a song, but the thinking's all wrong. This whole sacrifice deal, you can live without needing to kill.
I just love how Laura sounds. We then funnel to a moment of the Furies advancing where we kind of bring it all together, and I give one big, very kind of operatically climactic quote of that Furies / Athena motif. So at this point, my pitch to Jan and David is, what if we had a kind of I am Spartacus moment where our primary defender and then subsequent characters that we have formed some kind of positive relationship with have an opportunity to step forward. So this is now a very different kind of thing than just choosing, kick-ass, clever, and charming kind of trait-based choices. This is now not only about prior choices you made in the game, but about real connections that you feel you've made. So the first thing I had to do is come up with, well, what are they singing? What's this moment going to be? And I started calling it the Anthem, but it's this idea of a kind of everybody holding hands and singing one new recurring motif together. I'm working on the this idea of an anthem as the characters step forward. So this is where the combinatorial potential of this song is technically exploding. And when I say to people, there's literally tens of millions of variations, this moment is a big part of where that comes from. And I admit I'm being a little bit technical in that, and you'll see why in a second here. So this little anthem idea is a melody, but then there's also just a recurring cycling chord progression that I associate with it. Something that feels very sort of resigned, but also hopeful and hopefully sweet. And so let's say Freddie is your primary defender. Well, the Furies are advancing. Freddie steps up, takes Grace's hand. The guitar lele, of course, comes in. And then we get a very unpretentious and sort of stripped down rendition of this anthem's chord progression. But we haven't actually heard the melody yet. It's just the recurring progression. So with Freddie's vocals in there.
I'm okay dying again if it's with you.
As a side note, the guitar there is actually Jan and Gatesy playing together, recorded in Australia when we were at the Alan Eaton studio recording the orchestra. I recorded vocals with them for various things, and because they were instrumental songwriters part of this process and collaborators with me on all this, I just love the idea of having a little bit of guitar playing from them. So this bit there is them. So here is where the combinatorial craziness happens. One of the pitches I made to Summerfall was, what if the system goes back and tabulates every red, green, blue choice you've made through the whole game and tells you which one you've done the most? So in this scene, what we accompany it with is one of the three instruments that we would have been hearing in various amounts throughout the game, but the one that theoretically we've heard more than the others. So what that means is, let's say that Freddy is your primary defender, but broadly speaking, you've chosen Kick-Ass more than any of the rest. Well, then we get a very prominent bass solo accompanying this moment.
I'm okay dying again if it's with you.
What if we chose Freddy and it's Clever throughout the game?
I'm okay dying again if it's with you.
And lastly, what if we chose Freddy as our primary defender and throughout the game we've chosen Charming or Green the most?
If it's with you.
So this obviously had to work in every possible combination. So just choosing a few of the various ones at random, let's say Pan is our primary defender, and we had chosen Kick-Ass throughout the game.
I only wanna dance with you.
And let's say Persephone is our primary defender, but not our romance. That's one of the options here as well. And throughout the game, let's say we've chosen Charming more than any of the rest. Note the organ.
It's the right thing to do. The right place to be.
We also have two more Apollo options that can play here, whether he's your primary defender but not a romance, or primary defender and is. So just to give a quick example of how those differentiate from each other, here is Apollo, yes, romance, and throughout the game you chose Clever more than anything.
So romantic, me and you. I wouldn't wanna be cut to pieces with just anybody.
And let's say that you have Apollo as your primary defender, but he's not your romance, and you chose Kick-Ass throughout the game.
It's time to do something new. I'm ready to see.
So a very different message from Apollo, and you can see how we hear the vibraphone associated with Apollo, we hear the electric bass associated with Kick-Ass, and then we have a lyrical idea that's associated with this different message. The next thing that happens is the system asks you to choose who should step up next, and it's only going to give you certain options based on who you've developed certain relationships with. So we had to make a whole bunch of possibilities. Let's say, as a random example, that you inspired Aphrodite to not go through with the ritual, which would be the kick-ass ending of that song, and let's say that you had chosen Clever most throughout the game, then we're going to get Aphrodite plus Clever. Now, one of the other things that we did is, let's say that your primary defender is Persephone. Well, we hear her then start to sing the melody in the background of this moment. So you can see I've got my audio here of Persephone singing the tune, Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. I'm choosing the clarinet solo associated with having chosen Clever throughout the game. And then we have, of course, all the orchestration and everything associated with this moment and with Aphrodite more broadly. And Merle Dandridge as the awesome voice of Aphrodite.
I was so low, I nearly withdrew. Now I'm here because she inspired me.
Let's say instead that you managed to help good old Asterion the Minotaur, played by the awesome Rahul Kohli, find love with Hecate. And so that makes him available for you to choose in this moment. And let's say that you chose Kick-Ass throughout the game more broadly. And let's say that your primary defender is Apollo. That means in this moment, you'll get Apollo singing the background anthem melody. You'll get the electric bass from Tom Straley accompanying the scene. And you'll get Rahul's vocals singing this line. And of course, if you remember from that scene, the harmonica was a big part of the makeup of his song. And so, of course, it has to make a comeback here as well.
Grace, I love you. Oh, not in that way. I just meant to say you're great, Grace, and I'm with you. Or I'm not with you. I'm just you know what I mean.
So we have a bunch of different possibilities that can happen here. As a fun little side note, one of the only characters in the game that doesn't really sing is Erica Ishii as Hermes. But Hermes does have this one potential moment here. So I got to do one session with my friend Erica, which was a blast. So let's say that Hermes is the person you're choosing in this scene. And let's say you've chosen Charming throughout the game and that Pan is your primary defender. That leaves us with this.
Terribly sorry, but I'm afraid I'll need to stand here too. I really need to. Please do accept my apology.
So funny. We then have another round of these where it builds up and gets bigger, and we have another set of options. The same set of criteria apply, so that we're basically having our primary defender and then two secondary defenders that we get to set forward. The biggest difference here is that the orchestration is continuing to grow, which means I had to write all new bass and clarinet and harp parts to accompany it, and also just made it broadly larger. So I'll pick one at random. Here's if Eros is the person you choose, but if I mute the vocals, you can hear, let's say, I'll choose the clarinet part, for example, to be added. And you'll hear how the strings are now a lot more active, and there's a lot more kind of just general activity in the arrangement. So the question is, where is this all going to? Well, obviously, we need a big group sing-along. And this was fun because in addition to the fact that I got every single member of the cast to sing that da-dee-da-da-da anthem melody, using our trusty, wonderful Fig backers, built a choir of additional voices doing it. So I had a nice, big, lush sound. Before I play any of that, let me just share with you the orchestration for a moment. You can hear how the strings are getting nice and lush and moving, and that was just fun to do this kind of writing somewhere in the game. So let's say that we had chosen kick-ass throughout the game the most, then this is how it would go. We get the electric bass. More clever. More charming. And then, of course, our big cast of actors singing the melody. So see, even in just the 3 last little chunks of the song, there's actually quite literally millions of possible combinations. The only way to hear all of them, if you truly wanted to hear every one of these different vertical and horizontal combinations, you'd have to play the game over and over and over, and I'm fairly certain it's not possible to do within a normal human lifespan. So in contrast to all that branching and horizontal and vertical types of dynamism that can occur up to this point, the next moment funnels to one that all players will hear, which is Athena's realization that she's been wrong. And I don't remember whose idea this was, if it was mine or Jan's while we were working on it, but the thought became, what if we quote the opening song, Adrift, where Grace is saying she's lost at sea and doesn't know what to do with her life. Athena's realization that, oh my God, I might be the villain here, is a perfect opportunity to bring that back.
Of course, it's me. Because of me.
Of course, the bouzouki
this
again.
Prophecy
So starting here,
would come to be.
Felicia is singing Adrift.
My Olympus is gone, and you're all looking on at a stranger wearing my face.
So that I thought was a nice way to bring this moment to a head. From there, we have a normal 3-part red, green, blue trichotomy for the player to choose from among. And then that funnels once again to a single response from Athena.
There was a voice in me that shouted, Athena, you be strong. Be strong. No cost is great enough. It was wrong. I was wrong.
Quoting Aphrodite's
I
opening
was
ritual
wrong,
here.
and now I don't know what the right thing is. I leave it up to you what to do with this.
And from there, we have our final 3 choices in this song, which will determine the fate of the entire story. If you choose Kick-Ass in this moment, obviously Grace is going with a to hell with you kind of attitude. In fact, she fully just decks Athena across the face, which was a pitch from Jan that I always loved. And musically, the idea is that she actually is taking Athena's theme and essentially spitting it right back at her.
That's for me. And this, Calliope. Now we're done. Say bye to everyone. You're off to take a new exciting role in some dark hole. There you go.
Athena
Now it's
reprises that
yours to
tune,
drive.
and then we get a
Let's see
big
how
orchestral version of it.
long you stay alive.
She walks away in shame. And then that little motif for Athena. Sort of pathetic and sad as she walks away. defeated and ousted. So if Kick-Ass was us saying, we're done with you, you're a monster, go to hell, Clever is the more rational, even-keeled, Athena, you probably should just step down and walk away. And we decided to reference Apollo's song for this.
All these years you ruled this place. I think it's time you made some space. Enough of you. It's overdue. Step away. Let it go. Fresher hands should steer this
And then hear the cellos take on a drift.
and sail it to something new.
Sort of a fun cross-pollination of material happening there where the clarinet, because we chose Clever, and the cellos from the orchestra are quoting Adrift underneath the, something new from Apollo's song. So here, if I remove the vocals, you can hear, perhaps more obviously, the cello/clarinet duet on the Adrift motif in counterpoint to them singing Apollo. And finally, you can say to Athena, you know what? I forgive you. And in that case, this was a total idea of Jan's that I loved. We quote Medusa's song for reasons that are obvious in the lyrics, which was not something I initially would have thought of. And I was admittedly kind of resistant to when we first talked about it because I thought Medusa, she's such a secondary character, but her whole arc of being a kind of victim of Athena's cruelty made it a perfect thing to invoke here. And I, again, all credit to Jan and our discussions with David for coming up with that. So here, of course, we get the harp as a prominent motif. It's also worth noting that when they mention Calliope, the recorders that we associate with her character throughout the game come in.
I forgive you, Athena.
So the harp. And here's our Medusa motif.
Look into me. I know what I see. Yes, a monster. I've met monsters who weren't monsters. I'm a monster to be. I'm sorry, Grace. I'm sorry, all of you. I wish
Here's our recorders,
Calliope
played by Kristen Nagus.
could know it too. She does. She hears you.
And then a final quote of Adrift. So there you have it. There's kind of a simultaneous look under the hood and also at the pathway that it took to write what is, in this case, an 8-minute, give or take, song. The total runtime of material for this one is actually kind of modest for the length of it, running only about 34 minutes of material. But when you especially account for the vertical layering that is possible in it based on all the prior choices that you make in the game, the number of permutations becomes just literally thousands and thousands and thousands. And so I hope you enjoyed. I hope you heard things that you hadn't heard before. And once again, thank you so much to everybody that's checked out this game. hopefully it's really obvious from this that this was a passion project, a labor of love, where at every opportunity, all of us involved, whether it was the members of Tripod or Montaigne, the folks at Summerfall, our absolutely incredible cast, and our wonderful, wonderful director, Troy Baker. Everybody was always looking for, how can we make it better? How can we push it farther? How can we try to bring a kind of perfectionist madness to this? And I just can't say enough about how it was to work with all of them. So hopefully this gives a little glimpse of how fun and complicated that was. And stick around. I've got plenty more I can keep sharing.